Can't do it because you ain't never learned it. You got to take him in a room like Bill did Chubby and Earl Scruggs and Lester Flatt and teach it to him.
I'm going to tell you right now, you can go all around in these festivals. You'll never see a man that was a mandolin and walk to a place that had the rhythm that Bill Monroe had or the rhythm that Paul Williams had.
The rhythm is bluegrass.
Yeah.
It's different from everything
From the heart.
See?
And they ain't got it.
Now, I'm going to tell you something on this thing that's never been told and published yet. And his first time he's or anybody else has ever heard it. There's 5 instruments in bluegrass music. The bass is in 1 octave, the guitar is in 1 octave, the banjo's in 1 octave, and the fiddle and the mandolin are in the high octave. Octave is 10 notes. When you double a note, that's an octave higher. Pythagoras, a Greek mathematician, set that up.
Bluegrass music is a popular subgenre of folk and country music with defining characteristics that separate it from other similar folk or country genres. The formation of the bluegrass sound is most often attributed to the work of Bill Monroe and his band the Bluegrass Boys in the 1940s. Monroe's band configuration in 1946, including Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, is considered by many fans, musicians, and historians as the seminal sound of bluegrass music. Monroe was a musician and dancer from Kentucky who first gained notoriety in 1939 on the Grand Ole Opry with his band, the Bluegrass Boys. In this narrative, Monroe is credited with being the first to combine 5 popular folk instruments: the guitar, banjo, fiddle, mandolin, and upright bass. His high tenor singing were distinctive and have been emulated by many bluegrass musicians. Arguably, Bill's most influential band included Lester Flatt on lead vocals and rhythm guitar, and Earl Scruggs on the 5-string banjo in 1946. Scruggs played banjo using a 3-fingered roll that was less common and widely admired by audiences. After a falling out, Flatt and Scruggs went on to form their own band and create much of the same type of music as they did with Monroe. Many other bluegrass groups such as the Stanley Brothers, Jim and Jesse, Reno and Smiley, and the Osborne Brothers enjoyed increased popularity in the 1950s and 60s, while Monroe's popularity faded as other bands were willing to experiment with new sounds.
It was during this time that festival promoter Carlton Haney, folklorist Ralph Rinsler, and Monroe himself began dramatizing the origins of bluegrass in a show titled The Story of Bluegrass during the 1965 festival in Fincastle, Virginia. The dramatic retelling cast Monroe as the father and originator of bluegrass, as well as a victim to other musicians trying to steal his music. Not only was Fincastle one of the first bluegrass festivals of its time, crowds loved Monroe's narrative, and it is still accepted and recounted by many fans today.
Born broke, I never had no cash. Everybody calls me poor white trash.
Hillbilly is a difficult term to define. The Oxford English Dictionary cites the New York Journal in 1900, which stated, "In short, a hillbilly is a free, untrammeled white citizen who lives in the hills, has no means to speak of, dresses as he can, talks as he pleases, drinks whiskey when he gets it, and fires off his revolver as the fancy takes him." The Oxford English Dictionary's second definition is, quote, "a type of American folk music." This image of a hillbilly is still prevalent and popular today, and bluegrass music is closely associated with a hillbilly identity and a poor white trash lifestyle. The close identification of bluegrass with the hillbilly stereotype is due to geographic roots, the early categories of music in the recording industry, and exploitative media propaganda. First, the folk music that preceded it and the commercial genre of bluegrass came primarily from Appalachia. Second, record companies in the early 20th century separated records into race records, which were primarily black musicians, and hillbilly records, which were primarily white musicians. Lastly, television shows and movies such as The Beverly Hillbillies, Deliverance, and Duck Dynasty perpetuate white trash caricatures and connect those images with bluegrass music. According to the hillbilly narrative, bluegrass was and still is used as a tool to stigmatize and ridicule lower-class whites in America. Bluegrass in this way acts more as a marker of identity rather than just a musical genre. While many lower-class whites embrace bluegrass as their music, this has less to do with the actual history of bluegrass and more to do with them adopting a cultural identity despite how artificial and fabricated it may be. In fact, a Canadian study in 2015 found that people who identified as liking bluegrass the most tended to be female, middle-aged, and in the mid to upper socioeconomic class. This helps demonstrate that bluegrass as a white trash hillbilly genre is a flawed narrative, despite what popular opinions and media portrayals indicate. The bluegrass genre, as many define it, is less than 100 years old, but its roots predate the founding of the United States. In some ways, bluegrass is an old music, but a new commercialized genre. It has roots in the ballads and fill tunes from Scots-Irish immigrants, as well as in African-American blues traditions that used the banjo and six-string Spanish guitar. As Scots-Irish immigrants moved from Pennsylvania to the upper South regions of Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and North Carolina, they brought with them traditional drone-style fiddling and traditional tunes such as Devil's Dream, Soldier's Joy, Leather Breeches, all tunes that are now considered standard bluegrass jam tunes. The banjo was created by American slaves based on West African prototypes from carved gourds with a single string from instruments such as the banya, molo, and hama. Following the Civil War, white or hillbilly music combined with black or race music, as many poor white sharecroppers and poor black sharecroppers were in the lowest class of Southern culture, socially and economically. Some poor whites and blacks existed below the sharecropper class and were considered a third class. Many were tenant farmers or squatters and were under economically oppressive control of the white landowning elites in such a way that skin color bore no actual benefit, despite many people's understanding of Southern culture and history. In this context, poor whites in Appalachia shared a class consciousness in which they lived, worked, and suffered together with blacks. This allowed them to interact and share elements of each other's culture, especially musical traditions. Considering that electricity as well as movies and radio were not available as entertainment, live music and dance were certainly elements of life in the antebellum Southeast. The shared experience of poor, rural whites and blacks contributed to the collaboration on music that was the antecedent of the formal bluegrass sound. Bluegrass is not simply a fabrication created by white elites to separate themselves from working-class whites, nor is it the invention of a single man, Bill Monroe. Rather, the bluegrass genre evolved from thousands of musicians combining elements of African-American and Scots-Irish musical styles throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Monroe himself admitted that he first learned from his uncle Pendleton Van Diver, a Scots-Irish fiddler, and Arnold Schultz, a black blues musician who played guitar and banjo. Ultimately, all three historical narratives of bluegrass have varying levels of validity and need to be studied further in order to better understand a mischaracterized and yet truly American genre.